Hi everyone, my name is Abiola, and on today's lab, I will be challenging my hacking skills. So I will be hacking into my Metasploitable tool machine using my Kali Linux. So I'll be getting root access to uh, this machine, and then I'll do vulnerability scanning. And here are my objectives on what I'm going to be doing to be able to gain root access to the machine, and then what vulnerabilities that I'm going to be identifying using my vulnerability tools, and then the mitigation process used to mitigate the vulnerabilities. And here is the part A, and this is how to perform penetration testing on my machine or on any machine in general. So to effectively execute the penetration testing, you need planning, you need resource organization, thorough reconnaissance, vulnerability identification, exploitation, documentation, and reporting. So the first step in penetration testing process is to carefully plan and define the scope and goals of the test. So this includes choosing the target system, such as the machine you're using. In my own case, I'm going to be targeting my metasploitable machine too. So, and then you have to gather the necessary resources and tools that you need uh, in identifying the vulnerabilities on the system. So once everything is organized, the actual testing begins by conducting a thorough reconnaissance phase to gather information about the target system. So this includes identifying your IP addresses, your open ports, and services running on the machine. So various scanning technique tools can be used, such as port scanning, network mapping, and service enumeration can all be used to employ to gather the crucial information about the system. So after gathering this information, vulnerability scanners such as Nikto, Nmap, Nessus, OWASP, on and so forth can be used to detect any vulnerabilities and weaknesses um, in the system. So once vulnerabilities are identified, they are exploited to gain unauthorized access to the system. So in my own case, I'm going to use that to get access to my exploitable 2VM. So this may involve using known exploit, creating custom exploit, and so on and so forth. So the objective is to stimulate real-world attack scenario and assess the level of security. So throughout the process, it's always important to document and your findings, and then have a detailed report of your findings, and then provide a recommendation for addressing the identified vulnerabilities. And here is my next slide, is to summarize why penetration testing is valuable in an organization. So penetration testing, it allows organization to assess the security of a system and identify potential vulnerabilities. Penetration testing enables organizations to improve the incident response plan. It helps them to evaluate their security posture, and then penetration testing helps organization to make informed decision and allocate resources effectively to protect their critical assets. So here is handling failures in penetration testing. So handling failure, you can employ a variety of techniques and methodology to identify vulnerabilities and weaknesses. So to effectively handle failures in penetration testing, it is important to have a structured approach that include preparation before testing, strategies during testing, testing, and action after testing. So this approach ensures that failures are identified, they are addressed, and fixed properly. So before starting the testing, clear objectives and the scope of the test should be established to minimize risk and include all relevant system and network in the process. So during testing, various techniques and methodologies should be used to find vulnerabilities and weaknesses, such as network scanning, social engineering, and application testing. So after testing is complete, a duty analysis of the failures should be conducted, to understand the root causes and the risks they pose. So this analysis helps prioritize and allocate resources for remediation. So a comprehensive plan should be developed to address the failures, specifying actions like patching system, updating software, and hardening security measures. So after implementing, all these necessary fixes and patches, a post-testing evaluation should be done to assess the effectiveness of the actions and then identify and any remaining vulnerability or failure that needs attention. And here is the part B, and then here is my Nmap scan using 192.168.5/24 in identifying my target machine IP address. As you can see right here, that my Nmap scan report shows that my metasploitable machine IP address is 192.168.56.4, and you can see that we have several ports open right here. I'm using the Nmap -SV and then my target IP address, which shows the version of the open port. You can see here we have port 21, port 22, port 33, about 20 ports open, and I'll be using this port later on. Some of them lead me in my next upcoming slides. So here is the intrusive scan using Nmap-A and then my IP address, and you can see that we have some vulnerability present on all these open ports. And here is still the continuation of the intrusive scan, and also here is the continuation of the intrusive scan. So here is my NICTO scan, which I use NICTO-H, then my target IP address, and you can see the target port right here is port 80, and there are a lot of vulnerabilities right here that says the anti-click jacking S-frame option header is not present. You can see that the S-content type option header is not set, and there's so many other vulnerabilities on this particular port 80, which we will be talking about later on too. So here's my WhatsApp. I did the vulnerabilities scan using my target IP address. And here you can see a lot of vulnerabilities. You can see the alerted 21. We have the absence of the anti-CSRF tokens, the application error disclosure, missing anti-hijack headers, vulnerable GS library, information disclosure, debug error messages, and so many of them. Even on my next slide is still the continuation of it. It says server leak information via S power by HTTP, and and so on and so forth. And you can see right here the description of this one that says information disclosure debug error, says that the response appeared to contain common error messages returned by the platform, such as the ASP.NET. So which we'll be addressing later on. So here is my Nessus scan, and the Nessus scan shows 37 vulnerabilities, which means that the vulnerabilities on this machine are pretty high. You can see I have 3 for critical, I have 4 for I have 17 for medium, and 5 for low. And here you can see that the critical ones here under the PHP at my admin with multiple issues is saying the CVSS number is 9.8. 7.8, which is very, very high. And then we have the one on the high, which is 7.5. And that one also is still on PHP My Admin. So here is the Apache Tomcat, also multiple issues. And then the CVSS shows 10. That is a remote code execution on its own. That is pretty high. Pretty high. And here are, the list of them. And you can see most of these vulnerabilities are from port 80. And here is one of them right here, and as you can see, the description shows that according to the description, it's pretty much saying that the version is outdated and needs to be upgraded. And here as well, it's too, the version needs to be upgraded as well. It said the solution is to upgrade to a version of Apache Tomcat that is currently supported. So the one that is on the system is not currently supported. So you can see that it's showing critical. And here as well too, the Apache PHP GI CGI remote code execution too, it needs to be upgraded to the newer version. So then I did the nmap script on the port 21, which I'll be using. So I did the nmap sv script ft vstpd backdoor.nc on my target machine. So to determine the vulnerabilities in this port 21 versions, I have to search on Google to know the vulnerability for this service, and it comes up with a known backdoor that was introduced in a download of a software in version 2.3.4. As you can see right here, that the state says that it is vulnerable and it is exploitable, and then the version of 2.34 says it's backdoor. So here is the vulnerability that I did, which I will be explaining later on. And this is the part C. And in part C is the risk assessment and the gap analysis. So performing the risk assessment on any machine, whether you have an open port or any vulnerability of a system, require a systematic approach that involves identifying vulnerability on your system, assessing vulnerabilities and threats, evaluating the potential impact and likelihood of attacks. So analyzing existing security control and considering the overall impact on the organization. So by following these steps, organization can effectively identify and mitigate the risk associated with maybe open port, enhancing the overall security of the system. You have to be able to, do your initial assessment. You have to gather your information. You have to do your vulnerability scanning. You have to do vulnerability assessment report. So it is important to identify all these vulnerabilities within the system. So this can be done by employing various scanning techniques like the one I used, Nessus, Nikto, OWASP, and there are more other numerous vulnerability scanning out there that you can use. So these tools will provide a list of all the vulnerabilities present on the machine, which can then be analyzed for potential risk. So once the vulnerability has been identified, the next step is to assess the potential risk associated with these vulnerabilities. For instance, if there are open ports, you have to analyze the services running on each of these ports and determine their level of vulnerabilities. So this can be done by researching, common vulnerability associated with the specific services and version running on this open port. So a comprehensive assessment should also consider the potential impact of a successful attack on the virus system. So this involves evaluating the potential financial losses, reputational damage, and operational disruption that could result from a breach through the vulnerability and weaknesses in the system. So by understanding the potential consequences, appropriate risk mitigation strategy can be developed and implemented. So, and for And for gap analysis, it is essential to assess the existing security controls in place for all the vulnerabilities identified. So this involves evaluating the effectiveness of your firewall, your intrusion detection system, and access control in preventing unauthorized access or any malicious activities. So by identifying any weaknesses or gap in the security control, necessary improvement can be made to strengthen the overall security posture of the system. My next slide is the countermeasure to mitigate the vulnerabilities. My mitigation step is to limit the user privileges, employing intrusion detection and prevention system, patch management, close all unused ports, educating employee, upgrading old version of application to the latest version, and then handling the system is by implementing strong and unique password, implementing robust access control and user permission, employ robust authentication mechanism, implementing a robust web application firewall and intrusion system, and conducting regular security auditing and vulnerability assessment. And here is the mitigation of the vulnerability identified on the system scanned. So the mitigations I actually use on the vulnerability I identified are to close unnecessary open port. I updated the system to a newer version. I utilize firewall to filter traffic and secure port. I set password of the Metasploitable 2 to a complex password so that no one can get access to it. I updated the software within the system. I disabled multi-view. I enabled firewall on Apache 2. I disabled the HTTP trace and then control the NF table. And here is to describe your expected result. The expected result is like identifying and assessing potential vulnerability present in the system. I uncover security flaws of the system. I identify the security levels. Then I did a comprehensive report detailing the vulnerabilities I actually that I discovered on the system. And then I recommended the mitigation measure that needs to be done to prevent this from happening again in the future. Then I did patching and fixing the vulnerabilities that were present on the system. And here's the part D. And here is identifying the version running on port 21, which is the FSFPD 2.2.3. So I use the hard host on my target machine to identify that. So I use the exploit units /FTP/VSTPD -2.3.4 backdoor to exploit the system. And you can see right here, I use the arrows to set up the model with my target IP address. And here, as you can see that, I was able to gain root access to the Q3's machine. And here again, root access to the machine using my last name and the username and the password. As you can see, that says Abiola at Metasploitable. So the password was changed to a complex password, and then I control the NF table. So I was able to filter the traffic, going into the system, and then I control the NF tables of the system. And here is I did the ls-l to see the permission level on the system. Then I switched. I first of all switched to back to MSF admin, and then I switched to root, and then use the password I created to log in into the root. You can see that it says root at Metasploitable. So for me to be able to access it, the password I changed, because I changed the password from the default, the login password from the default to a more complex password so that nobody can just have access to the system. So here I enable the firewall. So here I enable the firewall. So the firewall actually is to filter the traffic coming in through port 80. And here is the part here. And here is the expected result after doing all that fixes and patches. And here you can see my initial vulnerabilities was saying 37. And then after doing all those patches and fixes, updated my software after I actually, enabled the vulnerabilities and the end tables, and it's still showing that the vulnerability has not gone down. So the first one I did was 37. Then when I ran the scan again, it came back at 27. So which still shows that it's still pretty high. So, and here you can see that the critical is showing 4 and the high is showing 3, and then 12 for the medium and 5 for the low. And here is just the list of them. So this one shows us most of the vulnerabilities, the mixed vulnerabilities, and the one on the mediums are from port 80. So it's like port 80 is still accepting a lot of traffic, and that's why the vulnerabilities are still high on the system. And here on my next slide, you can see that they're critical. You can see it says 10. 10 is more of like remote code execution. So on my Apache, you can see it says 10. On PHP my admin is saying high, and that one is 9.5, and so it is pretty high. So I have to look into my port 80 to see what I can do to bring down the level of vulnerability on the system. So what I did, I went back and then I had to reloaded the web server config on port 80. So I ran /etc/init.d/apache to force to reload the system. And here I went back and then I did the scan again, and then it shows that there are no vulnerabilities on the system. So that means the vulnerabilities are gone. So here you can see the difference, right? So the first one that I did was showing the first one, the initial one I did was showing 37, and then after doing all the patches and fixes, and it shows that there are no vulnerabilities on the system. So the system is running clean with no vulnerabilities. So here is when I reran the scan using the nmap 192.168.5.6.4, which is my IP address. You can see that the initial one that I did shows that there are several ports open on my target IP address, and then the one on the right, after I rerun it, and it actually shows where it says nmap scan report for my target IP address. It shows that no ports are open, which means that there won't be a vulnerability present on the system. So lesson learned from handling my system. So the process of adding a system offers numerous valuable lessons that can greatly enhance security posture of a system. From adopting a proactive approach to regularly updating and patching your system. Implementing access control is very crucial. Maintaining backups and prioritizing ongoing security awareness is paramount. Also, adopting of principle of least privilege, which means granting users only the minimum level of access necessary to perform their task. So these lessons contribute to the overall resilience and protection of any system or network. So by learning from system handling, individuals and organizations can significantly reduce their vulnerabilities to cyber threat and ensure a safer computing environment. So system hardening, emphasizes the significance of regular backup and disaster recovery planning. And here is to choose why I chose to implement the changes I did in terms of the cost, expedience and criticality. So by implementing the changes I made to my system, I have strengthened its security against potential attack from hackers. So these changes, includes disabling unnecessary services and open port, securing default account and passwords, updating software to fix any known vulnerability. I updated the older version to newer version and enable firewalls. So these hardening strategies ensure that my system meets standard requirement, complies with regulations and avoid legal or financial consequences. So the changes I made also improve the system performance and stability by optimizing resources and removing unnecessary configuration. So in summary, these changes have eliminated vulnerabilities in my machine, significantly reducing the chance of a successful breach. So this is not only improved the overall security of my system, but also minimize the impact of any potential security incident. So when evaluating the importance of implementing patches, cost is a significant factor to consider. Organization needs to weigh the expenses associated with patching a system against a potential impact of leaving vulnerabilities unaddressed. So while patching may incur costs in terms of resources and time, the financial consequences of a breach, of a security breach or data loss could far outweigh this initial investment. So therefore, considering the financial implication is essential in making informed decision about patch implementation. So expedience is another crucial aspect to factor in why implementing patches. So once vulnerabilities are identified, it is essential to address them promptly to minimize the window of opportunities for potential attackers. So delaying the patching process could leave the system exposed and increase the risk of exploitation. However, organizations must also balance the need for speed with, thoroughness of testing and validation procedures to ensure that patch implementation does not, cause system destruction or conflict with existing software. So striking the right balance between speed and careful execution is key to effectively addressing vulnerabilities. So the criticality of the potential consequences resulting from identified vulnerabilities should be considered. Some vulnerabilities may pose a higher risk and have the potential to cause significant damage to the system, compromise sensitive data or disrupt critical operations. So in such cases, implementing patches becomes even more imperative. It is crucial to prioritize and allocate resources based on the severity of the vulnerabilities to mitigate the likelihood and the potential impact of an attack. And thank you so much for listening and to my presentation, and I hope you found it helpful. And here are my references, and do have a good one.